And that's good. Alright, so it looks like we have this side of the motor done. Let's go ahead and move over to the ignition side. We have a brand new timing chain here. Go ahead and unravel this. Alright. A little bit of Loctite on the two bolts. Again, don't go crazy with it, because you might have a hard time getting it off in the future. A little goes a long way when it comes to the red Loctite, but if you don't want stuff coming loose, you're going to want to use something. You know, the bikes, especially the bikes that are on the track, jumping big triples and stuff, you don't want to take a chance anywhere. A motor locks up on the face of a jump, and it can send you on a big endo. So you gotta look at it like aviation. You know, aviation mechanics, they're not allowed to make any mistakes because they're flying in the air. These are the same. You don't really want to make any mistakes when you're flying in the air. So got these nice and tight. There we go. Alright, timing chain's in place. I like to wipe out the inside of the stator. These are magnetic, and metal sticks to it. It's just, you know, little debris from the transmission and clutches and stuff that as it wears off, it just sticks on the inside of here. So I like to get all that out of there. Alright, let me wipe this down. Alright. Slide the starter gear on for the one-way clutch. Have this little pin here, locating pin. You have to get it in its groove. There you go. You see we have a slot for it right here, so you want to kind of aim that. And then it helps to turn the starter wheel as you're trying to put this in place. There we go. This should turn one way, but not the other. I can't get it to spin. I can't get it to spin that way, but I can get it to spin this way, and that's how starter clutches work. And that indicates to me that she's sitting in there properly. Where'd my Loctite go? Oh, here she is. Again, Loctite on everything. Doesn't take much. You do want to be able to get it off again in the future. And cinch her down. That's good. Go ahead and put this thing back in its place. Oh, there we go. And the cover. Where do these pins go? Oh, here we go. One goes here. One goes here. Come on. There she is. And place the gasket on. And now we will put the cover on, the ignition cover. And then, yeah. Go. These two, remember I mentioned earlier to remember where they go. Oh, yeah, that's right, this one went here, that one went there, and then I'll put the other ones where they belong. I'll tighten them down with the cordless, with the drag set, and then I'll finish tightening them by hand. Right. Okay, I've tightened them down with the cordless. Now I'm going to tighten them by hand. Nice. And then I'll place this reduction gear back in place. Pop the cover back on. And tighten these down. Alright, go ahead and clean this up. Make sure you put this back in the proper direction. If you don't know, the direction it came out is the proper direction, usually. This front sprocket's, you know, starting to look like it's seen its better days. Let me go ahead and put a dab of Loctite on this as well. There we go. And now we'll tighten her up. Should be good. Then we'll cinch down the locking washer here. There we go. Now we have to put this little cover back on. Ooh, let me figure this out. Alright, I got this side of the motor pretty much done up except for the shifter. I will leave the shifter off until the motor's back on the bike. That way I can make sure I put it back on in a good position. I made a mistake on the other side of the motor. I'm gonna have to pull the clutch cover back off. I'm kind of new to making these YouTube videos, and I'm just new to working and talking and filming at the same time, so I'm liable to forget things I don't think I would have normally have forgotten this, but it is what it is. I forgot to put this thing back in underneath the clutch cover, a little oil pipe, so I'm gonna remove this clutch cover real quick. I'll check back with you in a minute and show you where I'm at. Alright, I forgot to add this little oil pipe in. I had to remove the clutch to get it back in here. You don't want to force it in, you just got to find this sweet spot. There it is, it'll pop right in place. And as with everything else inside the motor especially, a little bit of Loctite. You don't want anything coming loose while this thing's running. I've seen it, it's nasty. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up here and put the whole clutch cover back on. I'll hit pause so I can save you from watching all that. Okay, got that back together. Now I can say the bottom end is officially complete as far as like it has a clutch and the stator and everything on it. So we're going to start working on getting this top end together now. All right. Brand new OEM piston. First thing I'm going to do is get the piston, or should I say the circlip. I'm going to get one circlip in place before I even put the piston on the motor. That way I only have to worry about one more circlip once I have it on. So what I'll do is I'll pop this pin in here temporarily to help me get this clip in. Let me get this camera a little closer. Alright. Focus. Hold on. There we go. Alright. What I do is I start the clip with the open in the clip just in that big groove that you see right there. The big groove that helps you get them out. Start it right there, and then I take this flathead, I use my finger on the other side, my thumb to hold it in, and I just start sliding it into the groove. It's not easy, but you learn how to do it after a while. The pen helps keep it from going too far in there, and if it does go too far in there like it just did, as soon as you get all that pressed in, you can just pop it in place. There we go. That circlip's in place. Now we'll do the other side, but we'll do that when the piston's on the motor, obviously. We still have piston rings to put on too, so let's knock that out. All right. We'll start with the oil ring expander, or whatever they call this thing. All right, wherever the opening is on the O-ring expander, you don't want the end gaps near each other. So I'll show you what I mean. All right, I have one of the end gaps right here on this side, the other end gap on this side, and then the oil expander end gap is over here. So you have the oil ring right here, one end gap, and then the expander on this side. And then you want to press the ring all the way around, the oil rings, press them in all the way around, make sure they will fully go into the groove all the way around. That lets you know that the expander didn't overlap somewhere in there, and that'll make it a pain in the butt to try to get the cylinder back on. Alright, most rings have a mark on it, like a T or an R or something of such. That mark indicates the top. It's supposed to be faced up. On these bikes, the darker ring is the second ring from the top. And then this one will have the same T on it. I'm not sure if you can see it there. There you go. Alright. We're going to be staggering all these rings when we go to put them, the cylinder on, but we won't worry about that until then. So we have this piston ready to go. Now we just have to get it on the rod. Alright, I set the motor on its side. I stuck this rag up in the crank area in case this circlip springs out of here. It doesn't shoot inside the motor where we might have a hard time getting it out. Take a little bit of engine oil or engine assembly lube. This motor, I don't have a problem using engine oil as assembly lube, only because it's going to be started up pretty much right away. If you have a motor that's going to be sitting on the bench for a long time, yeah, use assembly lube because it hangs on. It clings onto the surfaces and it doesn't eventually drain down to the bottom. But if you're going to be starting up right away, engine oil is just fine. I would say if you're going to be starting up within a week or two, engine oil is just fine. Every piston has a proper direction. You got to know which way is front and back. Some pistons put a little dot on the exhaust side. Everyone's a little bit different. So I also like to verify by looking at the valve. You know, the little grooves I put here for the valves. I know that this is a 5-valve motor and 3 of the valves are in the intake, and the intakes on this are on the back side of the motor. So I'm going to put the piston on this way. And of course the Yamaha YFZ450 now has a reverse motor, and, you know, so it's good to know that you're putting the piston in the right way. If you're unsure, as always, look at how it came apart. Pay attention to the piston as you're taking it off, and that way when it's time to put it back on, you know which way to put it safely. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this clip back in just like I did on the other side. There we go. Got her in. So yeah, we can put the cylinder on now. Alright, the best way to get this gasket material off, for me at least, is a good sharp razor, fresh and brand new. I want to use a new one because the old one can sometimes gouge or scratch the surface, but a new one with a fresh blade, it's usually nice and smooth and does a good job. You don't have to make it look perfect. You just need to get all of this stuff off. so that you get a good head gasket seal. We'll do the same with the cylinder head a little bit later when we get to that. As you do this, be careful. And as you can see, I'm sliding a razor across the surface here. You want to watch your fingers, hold the razor real well, or whatever it takes, or find a different way to do it if you don't like my way. But this is how I do it, and I just make sure I do it very carefully. From the bottom side, the gasket came off and it's nice and clean, so I'm just going to wipe it with a rag and she'll be ready. Alright, I have the new gasket in place. I have the roll pins here in place, and this water transfer tube, whatever, with the O-ring. So now we can go ahead and get the cylinder on. We're going to want to stagger the piston rings and oil rings. The manuals will tell you which way to put it. Everyone's a little different, but really the whole goal here is what they're looking to achieve is that they're staggered the best they can be while they are still while you're still able to get the cylinder on quite easily. As you can see, there's a lip right here that helps the rings go in, but there's not a lip right here. So the idea is to have them staggered somewhere between this range, the end gaps from this range to this range, and having them staggered. You don't want the end gaps anywhere around here except for the oil ring. Except for the oil ring expander in the middle here. That's the only one that you can have, because when these oil rings get compressed, they will push that in place. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this thing on. So I'll go ahead and stagger the rings. I have one oil ring right here with the gap at the bottom, which means the next gap will be the oil ring over here, gap on the top. Next ring will be the bottom compression ring, and that will be with the gap on the back end, and then I will move this one over here so they are perfectly staggered. Now here comes, can be a fun part. I like to hold on this one so it gives you the room to put your fingers in right here. I will hold the rings in. I will start with, you got to get the timing chain guide right here in this groove, and then I will start with the bottom end. Hold on. Alright, I'll start with the bottom end here. Oh, make sure my rings stayed staggered like they're supposed to. Alright, let's try it again. Just kind of rock it while squeezing the rings in. If any ring starts to stick out, pull it back off right away. Don't try to jam it or force it. There she goes. When they're new, when the piston and the rings are new, it can be tight. Alright. Then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stick this 8mm back in here, and I'll snug it in. I won't crank it down tight yet because it doesn't have the cylinder head bolts in. Just tight enough just to hold it in place as I spin the motor. She doesn't like to pop out. And alright. As you see, I can use a magnet to pull the chain out. You always have to hold the chain up when you spin the motor so it doesn't get kinked up, locked up back there. Spin the motor, verify everything's good with the piston rings and everything. At this point, if you like, you don't have to, but I'm going to. Take a little bit of engine oil, coat the cylinder walls in here. I've done it both ways. I've dry fired them, and I've done the oil method, and I haven't found any difference in piston life or spring sealing or anything. The only thing I can say though is if you do add oil to it like I just did, they do have a tendency to smoke a little bit on initial startup, but it goes away in a couple minutes. So adds a little bit of lubrication to help get things rolling. Alright, I'm going to get it close to top dead center so you know it's easier to find later. There it is. Now I'll take the chain guide here. Let me wipe her clean. Slide her in the groove. She will hook into a spot down there in the bottom. So make sure you look closely in the hole. There it is. She's lined up. Alright, we're going to set this aside for a little bit now, because now we're going to work on the cylinder head. I want to check the valves and stuff before we put the cylinder head on. So what I'll do is I'll set the camshafts back in their place with the lobes faced up, well, except for the exhaust. The exhaust has the auto decompression here. You can see it has this weight, it kicks out, and this little thing comes, so when it's running, it'll pull that little pin in. That can get in your way when you adjust the valve. So make sure you have it just turned off of that so it doesn't press the valve in, because we're going to be checking the valve clearance here. These have these little pieces right here that you have to put onto the camshaft. There we go. There we go. Then I'll put all these in place and I'll snug them down. I'll just use the cordless drill again with the drag set. You don't have to, you know, torque these down all the way technically. You just have to seat them down. You just have to seat them down. Just a little bit of torque on them. What this is doing right here. Because all we're doing is checking the valve. Because all we're doing is checking the valve clearance. So the feeler's gauge. Let's see what we got here. Ooh, she's tight. She's tight. And she's tight. Well, we know the intakes are tight. I just tried getting the... Let me see how tight they are. That was a 6,000. Let's see if I get a 4,000. No, not in that one. Oh, I can get it in there. And over here. So let me try a 5 here. No, no. Alright, we know the intakes are tight. They're supposed to be about 6,000. And the exhaust is supposed to be about 8,000. Holy cow. Is it tight too? This can't be. Let me recheck these specs real quick. Alright, the intake's supposed to be 4 to 6,000. The exhaust is supposed to be 8 to 10,000. So let's try this again and see what we get here. Alright, I'll start with the 4,000ths on the intake. Definitely can't get it in that one. Okay, that one is good, and this one's good. Try 5 in them, or try 6. Let's see if we can can't get a 6 in these. So these two are good. This one's too tight, so we'll have to put a smaller shim in there. Let's go check the exhaust. Start with the 20,000ths. Man, it's just not going in. That exhaust is tight too. What the heck? So we know we're going to have to put smaller shims in the exhaust too, that's for certain. Let me go really small here and see if I can at least get something in. No, these are tight. Alright, let me pull the cams back out and we're going to put some smaller shims in it and see if we can get this clearance correct. I got the hardware out, pop the cam cap off, slide the cam out. There we go. The shim is right up in the bucket here. It likes to stick in it. What I like to do is measure them. 1.72 of a millimeter. Then I'll go through my little kit here of shims, and I'm going to pop in a 166. Let's see how that does. We're going to work on the intake first, and then we'll get to the exhaust. All right, get that on. Alright, let me seat these back down and we'll check it again. Alright, let's see what we have. See if we can get Alright, I can get that. That's a 5 thousandths. Can't get a 6 thousandths. Oh, barely. I can force it in there, so that's good. This one's pretty much at 5 thousandths. And this one's right about 4 thousandths. And this one's at 5 thousandths. So that's good. Now we're going to work on the exhaust side. And today, I guess you'll be learning from my mistakes. Again, I'm pretty new to making these videos. I don't know if these are actually off adjustment. I just think the shims popped out of their seat. So we're going to put this back in. Because what happens is you flip the cylinder head upside down without the camshaft in it. The bucket slides up a little bit and the shim jumps out of its seat. So always check that before you just start throwing shims at it. So we're going to, because it's interesting to find the exhaust off. The exhaust, it's usually the intake valves that get off adjustment, not the exhaust. The exhaust very rarely comes off of adjustment. The intake valves do when gets in there, your air filter is not very clean and starts letting dirt through. That's when your intake valves start complaining. So let's go ahead and seat this back down, and we'll check it again. Got a feeling they're going to be okay. Alright, we'll go ahead and start with a 8 thousandths since the specs are this is 8 to 10. So as long as we can get an 8 in there, and there's an 8. There's an 8. Let's check 10. Make sure it's not too big now. Let's see. Here's my 10. Can't get a 10 in. Can't get a 10 in. And just for just out of curiosity, let's see how the 9 feels. Nope. So these are set. Oh, I can barely get that one in. So that one's at an 8, and that one is, you can barely get a 9 in that. So these are good now. Valves are set on this. While I have the cams here holding the valve shims in place, I will flip the head upside down and clean this surface the same way I cleaned the other ones. Just a razor blade sliding across. Good fresh razor blade. A lot of times I'll also clean some of that carbon off right here. You can see it. You don't really need to do that, but it just happens, and it's okay. So I'll get this cleaned up. Alright, I have this nice and cleaned up. I mean, you can see this black line, but that's more of just a stain in the metal. But there's no gasket material on it. It's perfectly smooth surface now, so the new head gasket will seal well. And now I can flip the head back over and remove these. And get the head ready to be reinstalled. Alright, I'll give the head one more dry wipe just in case any dust is falling on it while we're sitting here working on the cylinder head. Drop these pins in place. There we go. Go get the head gasket. Alright, put this head gasket in. We grab the chain here, pull that out. Get the head gasket in the wrong direction. There we go. And I'll do the same thing. I'll give this thing the cylinder head another wipe just in case any dust fell on it while I was working with it or anything. You don't want to flip the head upside down without the camshafts in place, because these valve buckets will fall out and the valve shims, and you have to figure out which ones go where. So when you go to wipe it, just hold it up in the air and wipe its bottom. There we go. Now we just have to torque the head down to proper specs. Alright, we have some oil on the threads of the head bolts. You'll notice that 2 of the head bolts are shorter than the other 2. So the shorter ones in this one go on the back end, or the right side of the motor. One one's going to the left. Now we'll lightly seat these down real quick. Okay. It's always best to use new head bolts. I don't mind reusing them one time on these YFZ motors or the YZ450s that have these torque to yield type of bolts. One reuse for me is okay. I do that on my own personal bikes, but about every second top end or every second time I reuse them, or second time I just swap them out for new ones. So basically for me, I only reuse them one time. On this head, you first torque it to 22 foot-pounds of torque. So I'm going to do that to all. There we go. Heard it click.